So I'm Regina Marshall. I am one of the commissioners for the Commission on the Status of Persons with Disabilities. And it's truly a pleasure to be here with you today. I want to welcome you to our voting rights panel. I want to let you know that we have ASL and CART services available. And the CART URL will be shared in the Zoom chat for those who are attending virtually. Now I have the pleasure of introducing my co-moderator, Keith Jones. Keith is the president and CEO of Soul Touching Experiences, LLC. It is an organization aimed at bringing a perspective to the issues of access, inclusion, and empowerment, which affect him as well as others who are persons with and without disabilities. To achieve this multicultural cross-disability education and outreach efforts, he collaborates and conducts trainings with purpose of strengthening efforts to provide services and information for people with disabilities. The issues he tackles are wide, ranging from immigration, criminal justice reform, healthcare, and environmental justice, just to name a few. A fun fact that I'd like to share, a parallel to his policy and social justice work, is that Mr. Jones is a multi-talented artist who, along with Leroy Moore and Rob Temple, founded Crip Hop Nation, which is an international collection of artists with disabilities. Crip Hop Nation is currently celebrating 14 years with the recent Emmy Award-winning success of their title song for the Netflix documentary of the Paralympic Games, Rising Phoenix, and its critically acclaimed soundtrack. So without further ado, I will pass it along to Keith Jones.
Thank you, Commissioner Martin, for the introduction. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the panelists and thank you to the Commission for putting this event on. We want to welcome you to talk about what are we talking about today. We are in the election season, and we are going to hear from this dynamic panel about what it's like to participate in voting from an organizational standpoint, as well as what people see on the ground. The way that we will be doing this is each panelist will be posed a question. They'll have a few minutes to respond, and then we will go on. They will do a brief introduction first to start, and then we will reserve time at the end for questions and answers. Cool. All right, cool. All right, so we will start with our panelists going from my left to right. And our first panelist, I can't see all the way down the line because the glasses are fogging. There you go. And if you could introduce yourself.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. I'm Barbara L'Italian, and I am the director of the Disability Law Center here in Boston.
Hi, my name is Olivia Thompson. I am a Partners for Youth with Disability participant and a young adult looking for work.
Good morning. My name is Bridget Simmons Murphy. I'm a project manager for Secretary of State Bill Galvin, and I also serve as Secretary Galvin's designee on this commission.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mara Sullivan. I'm the CEO of the ARC of Massachusetts.
Thank you, everyone, for that introduction. And so what we will do is we will pose the question. And first, we will ask Bridget. Bridget, you work closely with the Secretary of State for Massachusetts to ensure disability access and voting. Can you explain how the SOC ensures accessibility for voting by mail, early voting, and on the election day?
I would be happy to. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you. From training election workers to voter registration, to our information for voters, to vote by mail, to voting in person, we strive at the Secretary of State's office to be proactive to ensure that all aspects of the voting process is fully accessible to all voters. To that point, I want to break it down into those key areas. Voter registration. The deadline is quickly approaching, everybody. So this Saturday, October 26th, is the last day to register to vote for the upcoming election on Tuesday, November 5th. So please check your registration status, change your registration status, try to say that fast, registration status, or register. And you can do that multiple ways. You can do that online through our online voter registration portal. You can do it in person at your local town election offices, or you can mail in the form. I would tell you though, be careful with the mail. You might want to drop it into your local town clerk's office or your city clerk or election commission, but that's coming up very quickly, so be aware of that. I also want to let you know that our voting materials, our registration materials are in multiple languages pursuant to the Voting Rights Act. So because of the federal census, that determines what ballots and registration materials are necessary for different municipalities. So for the city of Boston, for example, we have ballots that are in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And to that point, our AutoMark Voter Assist Terminal will not only speak English, Spanish, it will also speak Mandarin, Cantonese, and Vietnamese. So we do include that in all of our materials. And that goes for online voter registration as well. We also have forms in Haitian Creole, Russian, Cape Verdean, and Portuguese, depending on the area. Also, I don't know, has anybody received your information for voters book, the big red book that we mail? Yeah, we love our red book. Information is so important. And we do offer our information for voters, not only in those multiple languages, but also in large print, Braille, ASL, and we have an audio version. I will warn you, the audio version is 4 hours long, so enjoy, buckle up, you're gonna love it, but it's gonna give you all of that great information. Get some popcorn, that's right, a cup of coffee and some popcorn. To that point, you have choices to vote. You can either vote in person or you can vote by mail. Right now, in-person early voting is happening. It kicked off last Saturday. It will go all the way until Friday, November 1st. Hours and locations are determined where you live, so you can check that online at voteinma.com for all of this information. But we do have an accessible vote by mail program for certain voters with sight impairment, mobility or dexterity disabilities, other disabilities, that makes it difficult for an individual to mark their ballot privately and independently by themselves. You can use our accessible vote by mail program. And I also want to let you know, we work very hard with our 351 cities and towns to ensure that our voting locations, whether they be early or our polling locations on election day, are fully accessible for all voters. I travel across this Commonwealth ensuring that the locations are set up properly and they're surveyed prior to being made a polling location, which must happen at least 20 days prior to an election. So anytime there's a change made in a polling location, we survey it for accessibility first to see what we have to do to make the changes to make it accessible for all voters. That's for polling locations on election day and early voting sites. I will tell you, sometimes things happen and we might run across issues on election day. To that point, if any of you are out and about voting during early voting in person or on election day and you run into an issue, please reach out to the warden at that polling location. Make them aware of the situation, because we want to fix it then and there. We want to make and address that issue then. It's great to get a report 2 to 3 weeks after the election that, hey, we found some issues at this polling place. What if we could have made those changes on election day so that the next voter didn't encounter the same issue? Because things do happen and we try to work proactively. I also want to let you know, I just finished up over 65 trainings with over 150 communities here in Massachusetts, across the Commonwealth, training our election workers so that they not only know the procedural information of how to run an election, how to deal with voters, how to work with campaigns, how to work with paperwork, making sure our AutoMark is set up properly and ready to go, tested before election day and before the open of polls. We also work to ensure our election workers are welcoming, aware, and sensitive to all needs of all voters. So it encompasses a lot, and we strive to do well. We can always do better, and with your help and your collaboration, we will do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I have the next question, and it's for Olivia. Olivia, as someone with direct experience, what has been your personal experience with voting?
Yeah, so I've voted in 2 midterms, and this will be my second presidential election. Where I'm currently living, I have to walk 21 minutes down a road that doesn't have a sidewalk, boo, to my polling place. And if it's bad weather or I'm just not feeling up for it, I would have to ask for a ride from one of my parents. And that just doesn't work out because they're busy people, and I don't drive. So that's just the obstacle getting to the polling place. But despite being a wheelchair accessible building and having a lift, I can't use it because it's only for wheelchair users. And so this creates another obstacle for me climbing a flight of stairs. And I can do this relatively easy. It is just a lot of work. So I would encourage everybody to vote by mail. I've voted by mail before. I like it much better. And I would, once again, encourage everybody that is facing barriers getting to the polls to vote by mail.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is for Mara. Mara, from your perspective, can you talk about some of the barriers? There's one of them you just heard that face people with disabilities. And what should the voters know?
Thank you, Keith. And it's so nice to be here with everyone and with this expert panel. Thank you to the commission for putting this on. I think there are, as you heard, many barriers, I'm really confident in the state of Massachusetts as to trying to address these barriers that might come up. But again, a lot of them are so individual. So what's really important is that you are able to advocate for your needs. So if something isn't allowing you to vote or to get accessibility, that you're able to talk about that. Bring it to the ARC, bring it again to your local warden, be able to communicate those issues as much as possible. Listening to Olivia, I think there are some additional barriers for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that people might not be as aware of as they come into the polling locations, and things like lines and stairs and noise and sensory issues and other challenges that may, kind of be new to some people. And hopefully some of those are getting addressed in the training that Bridget's doing, and people are being more compassionate and welcoming. We can't always train all of the people that come to these voting locations, and that can be challenging for voters with intellectual or developmental disabilities, including autism. I know personally, when I would go to vote and bring one of my sons who has autism, I would have some challenges waiting in line with some of the people around me. And even one day, a woman behind me in line made a comment about my son's noise level and controlling his behavior. I didn't say anything. I didn't even turn around. And then a moment or two later, she recognized from a sort of a squeal that he made. And she said, "Oh, never mind. And she used the R word." And that sticks with me forever. And actually I have a little like PTSD when I go back to that polling location. So the stigma is still there. Now that my sons are older, and they are actually able to come and vote themselves, we still feel that stigma. And there's a lot of eyebrows raised when we go in. I think it's something that, although I believe that the voting by mail is a game changer, I also feel like we have a duty to be there in person and to help people understand that we are part of this society, that our vote counts, and that we're going to be there regardless of eyebrows raised or not. But I do understand the levels of anxiety that can be there for the individuals and their support people. So to just get back to, how do we help manage some of these barriers? I think it's important to have a plan A and a plan B. If you don't have the supports like the ride to get you there, or the lines are too long, have that ability to do a drop-off ballot, or have that ability to have a second person there to support you. So I think those are some of the things I'm most worried about. But the other piece I was going to talk a little bit more about is guardianship. And I know we'll hit on this a little bit more, but it kind of goes to the same issue. When I'm there, my son is under guardianship, but I want him to be there and experience the voting piece. And I feel a little insecure sometimes about how much I need to do for him when I'm in the polling location. But I need to get over that. It's okay. We're there together. We know how he wants to vote, and we're going to move forward and do that. So for me, it's really important that we get out there as much as possible, work on the inclusion factor, and really make sure everyone is advocating when their needs are not being met.
Thank you, Laura. The next question is for Barbara. Barbara, accessibility in polling places is critical for people with disabilities. How is physical accessibility being addressed in polling locations?
Yeah, so we at the Disability Law Center feel that it's imperative that we train a cadre of volunteers to be able to go out on election day to see whether or not folks can physically enter the polling place, whether there's accessible parking, whether anything is in the way that would prevent you from being able to get into the building, whether or not the door is too heavy to be opened. And then once inside the door, we want to be sure that the AutoMark machine, that there's one at every polling place, that it is separate of the other polling space so that people have their privacy, and that someone there knows how to use the machine and that it's turned on and working. And I fully respect the Secretary of State's office's efforts in this regard, but we find that on election day, frequently there are issues. And so we have been setting about trying to train volunteers from the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, folks from the disability community. We did a webinar yesterday for an hour and a half to explain how people can help with accessibility audits. We actually have a short form that can be done on someone's phone, and a longer form that we will actually be having the independent living centers assist us with. But every one of you, if you go to the polls on election day, can go in and see what the accessibility is. Anyone can use that AutoMark machine. It is not solely for those who aren't visually impaired. Anyone can ask, and that's what we do. We go out and we use the AutoMark machine to be sure it's set up and working properly. So those are, we find there are issues on the ground that sometimes you can't assess until the day of the election because it might be a school, it might be something that's being used for another purpose. Towards that end, again, appreciative of the Secretary of State's office's efforts, but we feel it's really imperative that there be legislation that require that the Secretary of State's office, at least every 4 years, go out and monitor polling places. We actually had a bill that Representative Kay Khan filed this year, House 701, which made its way out of the Election Laws Committee. But we really feel it's important. We have one voting rights advocate that is paid for with federal HAVA funds, Federal Voting Act funds. But we think there needs to be more eyes and ears out there looking at these polling places. Because some places aren't subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act. I don't know if people realize that, but churches are not required to meet ADA standards, and churches are frequently places where there is polling going on. So we do have a piece of legislation that we will refile next year in the hopes that we can standardize this. It also would then require in the legislation that if there are issues at a polling place, it gives the community 5 days to put in writing what their plan is to address it. And it also gives the Attorney General's office the opportunity to weigh in if need be, if things aren't addressed. So I just want you to know that that piece of legislation is something we care very deeply about, and we want to be sure that people do have physical accessibility into the polls. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to take a quick minute to recognize the legislators that are present here with us today. We have Representative Garlick, who chairs our commission. Representative Muratori, who also is one of our commission members. I'm not sure you can still hear, but we've got Representative Donato.
Yeah, so
Very good. And Representative Owens is here as well.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, Representative, for coming, and thank you all. We'll be moving into the second topic, but I wanted to give it a little context. This is 2024. We are 59 years into the passage of the Voting Rights Act. We are 14 years removed from Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act being subject to the Shelby County versus Holder decision, which removed pre-clearance. So Massachusetts was not necessarily that, but that ruling from the Supreme Court kind of contextualizes some of the barriers our community will be facing in terms of what is accessible, who is right, who has the right to vote, who should be voting, and understanding that voting in the United States for people of color and people with disability has always been a highly controversial and political issue because we are not seen as active participants in the democracy. And particularly if you have a physical or intellectual disability or non-apparent disability, we are not seen as valuable voters. So this panel is here to talk to you about why everybody's civil rights should be adhered to, why the access to voting is critically important. And with that, we will move to topic number 2, voting rights for people with disabilities. And this question is for Olivia. Olivia, finding candidates that align with one's values is critical for informed voting. How can individuals with disabilities find candidates that align and support their issues?
Thank you, Keith, for the question. I would just like to start off by saying, do your research. I think it's 2024, like, do your research. Like, it's just, it's pretty self-explanatory. One good resource is votesmart.org, and it's a nonpartisan database where it just kind of, you can put in a candidate and it'll tell you how they feel about specific issues, environment, abortion, disability rights. It's just a great resource. Oftentimes, a candidate's website isn't really transparent about all the issues, including disability rights. Sometimes it's just focused on housing or transportation in a more general sense. So I encourage voters to kind of look more into trusted sources that is completely subjective, and see what organizations actually endorse each candidate. So if it's a local or a nationally known organization,
And I have the next question for Maura. You briefly touched upon this earlier around guardianship and how that can impact voters' rights. Can you discuss how guardianship can impact voting access for folks with disabilities?
Definitely, this is my new favorite topic, actually. I just feel like guardians need to come out very strong this year and not hold back. Voting is a human right, and the guardian is there to act in the best interest, necessitated by that person's limitations, but to express that person's needs and values. And when you're the guardian of someone, you are hopefully very much in touch with those needs. And I'm been a little bit surprised actually by the response of some guardians that are part of our community, where they feel that, you know, maybe it steps over a line to vote for the person that they are the guardian for. And honestly, I think it's so important that we realize that we are actually holding back, a part of their human rights by not helping and making that happen. So it's been great to try to do some education and awareness around this topic, even for people who are not verbal, who can't maybe express an opinion on a candidate, or whether or not there's concern around how much they're processing. My belief is that if you are representing that person and you are trying to give them access to all of their human rights, this one is critically important, especially in today's environment, where services and supports that will directly affect that person are really at stake. So yeah, my personal note here is let's really push this in society. Keith and I were talking earlier about why there is even a checkbox on the guardianship application that allows you to check off that this person should not be allowed to vote. And we really need to think about why that's even there, because that is also holding back human rights.
This next question is for Bridget. Bridget, issues can arise, as you spoke about, on election days. What happens if there's an accessibility issue, such as the AutoMark machine malfunctioning?
Thank you, Keith. I can tell you, I married a guy named Murphy 12 years ago, and I didn't realize when you marry a Murphy, the law automatically applies. But to that point, things can happen on election day. Absolutely, positively, things can happen. But we try to be proactive in the fact that they don't happen. I just want to go back on a couple of points that have been stated earlier. Use the lift. You have every right to use that lift. It's not just for an individual in a wheelchair. To the point, I'm happy you brought up neurodivergent voters. We go over this in our trainings, talking about that you might have voters standing in line with fidgets or stuffed animals or wearing headphones, and that's okay. They're a part of the process. So we make sure our election workers are aware of it. And to the point regarding buildings that may not necessarily have to follow the ADA, they do on election day. A polling place can, if it is a church, must be made accessible for election day by temporary measures or other measures. Although it might not fall under that, it falls under election day for sure. We work to ensure our accessible equipment is up and running. We have an extensive testing program where we test these units not only once a year for preventative maintenance, but we also test them prior to every election. And on election morning, our AutoMarks are turned on, set up, placed in a position, 36-inch path of travel around it to enable a voter to sit if they choose to. Also to make sure the screen is facing away from the path of travel so the voter has privacy. And what happens is the warden or maybe the precinct clerk will take a ballot, go over to the AutoMark and mark the ballot as if a voter was doing so. Confirm the ballot was marked properly, and that ballot is then spoiled. We do this before the polls open, and we do this halfway through the day as well to ensure that it's fully functioning for Election Day. If there are issues with the AutoMark, that's when we have a troubleshooting line. We have folks give us a call. We have technicians stationed throughout the Commonwealth to get there as soon as possible. Now, I will tell you, sometimes things go wrong. Computers and marking devices aren't as perfect as we humans. Sometimes things happen. And to that point, I want you to know, if the AutoMark is down, you still have other options with assistance to vote in person on Election Day. If you have someone with you, that individual can assist you. And if you don't have someone with you, 2 election workers must assist, and it must be 2 election workers, so that we have the triangle of trust, so that each individual has a witness to ensure that one election worker is reading the ballot, the other election worker is marking that ballot in accordance with the voters' choices. So there is still that ability to vote. Maybe not the way you want it, and I'm sorry, but you do have that option just in case the AutoMark goes down. The other thing is, things happen. Parking. Barbara brought that up. We must have accessible parking. If there is no parking lot, there must be at least one on-street accessible parking spot for Election Day. You know what happens sometimes? Our election workers will show up on election morning who has an accessible parking space, and they park their car in that spot. That's unacceptable. Move it. We'll find you another spot. But that must be made available on Election Day. But those are things we can address then and there. So back to the point, for anyone surveying our locations on Election Day, be in touch with our office. The only individual you can speak to on Election Day regarding any issues is the warden within the polling location. You cannot pass the guardrail into the voting area if you're not voting, so you can oversee some things. And we ask you that you not get in the way of any other voter while you're there, because voters are there to vote. But we want to make sure we can also accommodate any surveys that are going on during Election Day. So that's important. And the other thing, our office is available. Call us, email us, voteinma.com, get a hold of us. We have phones going from now until Election Day, all day on Election Day. If something goes wrong, we will be there to try to fix it as soon as we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. We're staying with Bridget. We're staying with Bridget. As technology advances, are there any plans to make sure that to change the AutoMark or to update our voting machine?
Yes. Yes, as much as I love the AutoMarks, they're like my babies. I have one in the back of my car wherever I go. And it's really funny when I forget to turn it off and I hear on my way back from wherever I am, please insert your ballot. Please insert your ballot. I'm like, oh, I didn't turn it off. The battery's on. But to that point, yes, we are looking at new technology, and we're looking at something that will work with how we do things here in Massachusetts. Voting equipment must be federally certified, but Secretary Galvin takes us a step further here in Massachusetts, and we have certification at the state level as well. So we need to make sure that whatever we look at has to follow specific security and technical regulations, work with what we do here in Massachusetts. We are a home rule state. We have 351 cities and towns who run their own election with their own tabulation equipment. So we have to make sure that something works with every tabulation equipment. That's a little different than when the AutoMark really kind of was one size fits all, uses the same ballot, marks the ballot. Moving forward, we're not sure if that's going to be available or not. But join us. As we chose the AutoMarks following the implementation of the Help America Vote Act, we involved all community members, all stakeholders, voters, election workers, you, members of the community, be a part of it. So I guess all I'll say to you is, Keith, yes, stay tuned and please get involved.
Thank you.
Our next question is for Barbara. Barbara, what is the reality of what the Disability Law Center is observing in their work around voting access?
So I want to build a little bit in terms of on what Morris said in terms of guardianship. It's amazing how many families, as I go around the state, and oftentimes in BIPOC communities that have been told that guardianship is required of their loved one, have no idea that they're able to vote. So under most circumstances, people under guardianship can vote. And I think it's really important that we spread that word. I also want to explain that a large number of people with disabilities live in institutions, nursing homes, group homes, assisted living, veterans homes, people under developmental or people with psychiatric civil commitments, jails and prisons. As long as you have not been convicted of a felony, you are able to vote. And we are really doing a lot of outreach this year and training to ensure that people in those institutions are aware that they can vote, have been registered to vote, and have a plan to vote. It's really that important because let's say you live in a nursing home and you've moved to a different community, right? You have to have registered. And there are great concerns, particularly in some of our institutions, because of the workforce shortages, that there aren't enough folks that would typically have assisted either with getting people physically to the polls or with helping them with filling out their vote by mail. So I really want people to think about the high levels of disabled people that live in many of the places I just mentioned, and how important it is that we make sure that they are able to vote and that they have a plan. And lastly, I would just say Disability Law Center was really proud to bring to court what resulted working with the blind community around making sure that we have accessible vote by mail. It's not in the Red Book. It's not mentioned in there as an option, and it truly isn't for everyone, but it is a really underutilized asset here in this state. To be able to apply and to be able to vote, using your assistive devices at home. So, I just want to reinforce that this accessible vote by mail for those who are blind or low vision, or those who lack the dexterity to be able to independently fill in a ballot. I mean, that's my son. My son is on the autism spectrum. He has a lot of fine motor deficits, great difficulty filling out a ballot. So I just want you to think in terms of who could benefit from using that particular accessible vote by mail. It's a really underutilized asset. So when we think of accessibility, it's physical accessibility to the polls, a working automark machine, but it's also making sure that those who can't make it there have access to a ballot and someone to help them if they need it, in making sure that that gets returned.
Thank you. All righty, we are going to move into topic 3, which is one of my favorite ones. This is the hot and sexy topic of informed voting and advocacy. We are in the state that is one of the leading states in terms of independent living, disability rights, IDD, ADAD, autism, in terms of investing in our community and giving ourselves independence and rights, even though we're still debating on whether or not individuals with disabilities actually should have the right to vote. So one of the questions, and first we'll go to Mara. Empowering voters with disabilities is key. How do voters with disabilities find out if a candidate actually supports their issue?
No worries. Thank you, Keith. Empowerment is my life, so I'm very excited to talk about this. One of the things we realized as we started to take on voting, we have a great campaign at the ARC Votes, and I'm very proud of the work we're doing to provide webinars and interviews from people with disabilities, taking the voter pledge. So check it out if you can. But one of the things we realized was just how overwhelming the amount of information out there is to people. So, if you just Google, accessible voting, I mean, there's just pages and pages. And how do you start to understand how you actually make a voting choice and figure out which candidate is aligned with you? And especially difficult when advocacy organizations are bipartisan as well. But we like to really make sure that every individual, first of all, understands that there's a lot of misconception out there that your vote doesn't matter. And we want to really get past that. I mean, I think everyone here in Massachusetts that follows the arc of Mass understands that every action you take with the legislature matters. And that is the same thing here. Every person's vote counts. So we have been really trying to empower people to understand this piece, but also to reach out and to get involved, to really understand more. So to attend community forums, if you can even hold community forums, and to access, our website and the Arc of the United States to start to understand the bigger issues. What are the types of questions that you want to ask or want to get answered about a candidate? And honestly, the two candidates, at least that we have, for the presidential election, already have a track record. So that is something that you can find out about. I think, the commission has a ton of really great website resources listed, as well as the Arc of Massachusetts. But I will say, we would love you to reach out directly to us, and we can help answer any questions and guide you to the right and to the appropriate places. I know some of the fact-checking websites are important, like factcheck.org. Also just to mention, I think, Olivia, you might have mentioned it, that, often the issues that are out there for people to understand are big issue topics like housing and environment. And you really got to dig a little bit more to understand where these issues, where a candidate is supporting issues of disability. So if you need help with that, that's really where the ARC is available.
Thank you. Our next question is for Olivia. Olivia, your voting choices really reflect your advocacy work. Could you tell us a little bit about what informs your voting decisions?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for the question. What informs my voting is definitely candidates focusing on the issues that I'm concerned about. And as it's been mentioned multiple times, it's kind of hard to find disability being talked about on a lot of candidates' websites. So you have to dig deep or just kind of generally accept answers like accessible housing or accessible transportation. But I'm concerned about things like disability, workplace inclusion, ADA progression. We all know that the ADA passed 30 years ago. There still needs to be stuff done. That was great. It broke a glass ceiling, but there is still more to do. But more importantly for me, accessible transportation and housing. I recently got into transportation advocacy. I was a part of the Paul Spooner Generational Summit. And so that's been really rewarding and powerful. And yeah, I would just encourage people to dig deep and don't accept no as an answer.
Thanks.
So advocacy is a really powerful tool. How can voters with disabilities effectively advocate for their issues?
Yeah, so I'm a strong advocate for what I believe in, like I mentioned, and I would love other people to feel empowered about issues that they're passionate about, whether or not we share them or not. I've talked to representatives and legislators multiple times about accessibility issues. And for 2 elections now, I've actually written postcards to voters in battleground states to urge them to vote because, believe it or not everybody votes, even though they say that they vote.
Thank you. So as we wrap up our panel discussion, we'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to share one takeaway message that they'd like to leave the audience with. And we'll start with Barbara.
Thank you. Two quick things. If you're interested in what I was referring to, we have lots of information in two places. One is the Rev Up, REV Up website. Rev Up stands for Register, Educate, Vote, and Use Your Power. And so that is something that we lead on in the state. And there are stickers if anyone wants it because they can't remember the name of it, but Rev Up would be one. And then the other, I absolutely agree that if there are issues at the polling place on election day, the first stop is to the warden to try to fix what's happening in the here and now. But we also will be manning a hotline for anyone who has questions beyond that where things aren't able to be resolved at the Disability Law Center. The number we have is 617-723-8455. So if people are encountering issues and they're not able to get them settled, certainly they can contact the Secretary of State's office, but we also will have lawyers available all day on election day. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. So kind of going off of my last answer, and you can feel free to quote me on this or not. This was like a eureka moment. Words are a powerful tool, but action is a powerful weapon. So like I mentioned, people say, oh yeah, I go vote. It's like, show up to the polls, please. Like that is the most powerful thing that you can do is voting. And just a single vote, I think people don't appreciate their vote. I think people just think, oh yeah, I'm just a singular person. Like it has come down to single, votes in the past. So please get out and vote. Don't just say you're gonna vote. Go to the polling place. Great.
I stress this a lot in our election worker trainings where we go over 2.5 hours of a lot of material. And I ask the election workers to leave with 3 things. If you forget everything else, remember these 3 things. If you're unsure of something, ask someone who can help you. And that should apply to any day, every day. 2, if you see something, say something. Help us then and there. Let's make a difference. And the 3rd thing, which I add, I don't have to add to this crowd. I usually say to the election workers, be nice, be kind, be wonderful, be welcoming. But I'm going to ask all of you, get out and vote. I'm going to echo what Olivia is saying. Be a part of the process. Join us. Contact us if we can help you. But thank you and vote, 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 vote.
So I would like to leave people not with any kind of pessimism, but at this point, we are in the greatest crisis that we've ever experienced in the home and community-based era, meaning things are really threatened. Our Medicaid, as you heard, the workforce. I don't think there's a more critical time for the disability community to come out and vote. So that's my number one takeaway. Also, what Olivia said, it might be hard to vote. It might not be something that feels comfortable, but if you do it once, you're going to feel comfortable. So those people out there that haven't really attempted to do that, it can be hard, but you can do it. And then the last piece is just if you know people who are guardians, remind them that this is okay, that we need this movement forward. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank our panelists. And we are ahead of schedule, so we got a little time for you all to ask questions. Don't ask any, no, you can ask. We're going to open it up for Q&A, and Imani will point out and we will direct your questions to the appropriate panelists. So if you have questions, signal, just don't throw nothing at us. Questions?
All right, there's a few questions here. I'm going to pass the mic and you can state your first name.
Hi, my name is Alexa, and I also have a special needs son. He's 17, he just turned 17. I wasn't aware that once I become his guardian, I can vote for him. My question is, what is being done in general to educate parents like myself that if you become a guardian of a special needs person, that you can actually vote on their behalf?
Who wants to answer?
Yeah. I'll take your mic. Well, I would jump in on that. As we explained earlier, it's kind of a misconception, right? That, and there are certain guardianships where it would be that the person would not be eligible. So you have to check the guardianship application. And I think it's something that we really need to do more education on as people are applying for guardianship to make sure that that box doesn't get checked sort of on almost automatically, because we really need to think about this as a human right. Why are we taking away that person's human rights through a checkbox? So yeah, the ARC is going to be doing more education around this. We included it in a webinar that we have online, so you can go and watch it. You know, I know that, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit more. The burden is not on the individual under guardianship or the guardian to sort of prove that they are able to vote. You can just go to the voting and do that. You should check your guardianship application. But I'm glad to hear that this was news to you and we can make a difference.
Thank you, Maura. I've got a question here online from Kate. This question is for Bridget. Bridget, as you know, the Automark is very old technology that is known to be glitchy, and it's a real challenge sourcing replacement parts. You have spoken over the last few years in RevUp conferences about looking to certify new accessible voting equipment. Can you speak on that, please?
Thank you for the question. There is misinformation out there that there are no parts available. That's absolutely positively incorrect. So there are plenty of parts available, replacement parts. Actually, I was in the town of Orange. Has anyone been to Orange, Massachusetts? Yay! I had left Cheshire. Anyone been to Cheshire? I went from Cheshire to Orange, and I actually ran into a malfunctioning Automark. And I had the tech, so that was 4 o'clock on Monday, maybe 5 o'clock, I can't remember. And by 7 o'clock the next morning, the part that fixed where the ballot is inserted was done. So that is a misnomer, and I want to clarify that. So I appreciate the question. And yes, we are looking at new technology in terms of accessible voting equipment. We've started the process, but we have to do what we did when we implemented the Automark. It's take our time, include everybody, be a part of the process, and find something that works for the state of Massachusetts. So please stay tuned and please be involved.
Thank you, Bridget. All right, let's move on to this side. Keep going.
Hi, I'm Zen. If you have an issue with the voting, like say a machine's broken, and you don't have anywhere else to go, would you have to go to another area to vote?
Is that for me? I think so. If you go on election day and you choose to use the Automark and there is an issue, stay right there because you have other options to vote. If you have someone with you, that individual can assist you in marking your ballot. If you are by yourself and you require assistance to mark your ballot, 2 election workers will assist you to ensure your ballot is marked in accordance with your choices. Don't go anywhere. Stay right there. And if you have any questions within your polling precinct, make sure you speak to the warden and they'll be able to help you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm coming to you, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, thank you very much. I'm sorry I was late. It's wonderful. What I heard was great. My name's Mary, and my question is, I spoke to someone recently, and this individual has a traumatic brain injury as well as a lot of psychiatric disability issues. And the person said to me, why should I vote during the presidential election? It's, this country has an electoral college process. My individual vote does not count. And I'm looking for ways what to say to this person, other people that say that. this person has strong ideas and opinions and strong feelings about how she would vote, but feels that her vote doesn't count. So what would, any of you that want to speak up on that, I'd love to hear you.
So we have the presidential, but we also have our state people on the ballot. And last election cycle, there were a couple of races in the House that came down to very few votes. There were recounts because we had people winning by margins of under 10 votes. So I think it's the presidential, that's very consequential, but you also want to see who represents you here in this building, in the state, in the Senate and in the House. Because in many ways, with the inertia that's been happening in DC, chances are that many of the things that you care about are going to be addressed here in Massachusetts faster than at the federal level. So I would remind them that it's important to vote all the way up and down the ballot. And again, there's also 5 ballot questions that have a direct impact on people. So it's not just the presidential, it's state rep, state senator ballot questions as well.
Thank you.
All right, I've got one more question.
Mary, I will answer also, don't forget to vote on MCAS.
Yes.
Because the 1% who is not passing MCAT, not getting graduation, mostly are disabled people with disability. That's what I will go vote for. My son has failed 3 times, and he Moral remembers, he told Senator Markey, I need to pass my MCAT if I want to live by myself. But he failed. And we're fighting hard to get him this diploma.
Thank you. All right, Jesse.
If I could just add something about the presidential election, actually, in the battleground states, the race is really close, like neck and neck, and it'll probably be decided by like a few thousand votes in different counties. So actually, even the presidential, one vote can actually make a difference. I mean, not just one, but a few. That's my prediction.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question. The one and only Greg from Community Work Services. And they are providing our current catering services today.
Thank you. You asked, we work with a number of people who are returning citizens and also disabled. So you mentioned, it's my understanding that in Massachusetts, you do not lose the vote, right to vote. But I thought I heard you say you do, which is extremely concerning.
No, I didn't.
You fell in.
So the question is, if you have a young lady from this, I can't see the name, from the Secretary of State's office.
I just want to I didn't answer anything to that. It's my understanding that no, your vote is not the right to vote is not taken away from you unless you're serving for a felony at the point in time. But as soon as you finish that time, you're back. You're back. Yeah, I think there was a maybe just misunderstanding of that. So from what I heard in an answer to another question, but no, as soon as that time is served, as you said, returning voter.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say one?
Oh wait,
Closes are.
Can I just say one more thing, because it wasn't touched on, but sometimes folks in the disability community might find themselves in the hospital on election day, right? They intended to vote in person and they've landed in the hospital. I just want you to know that if you have been admitted to a healthcare facility within 1 week of the election, you can actually apply for an emergency absentee ballot. We didn't talk about that earlier, which is why I think it's important that you know. And you can request that up until 8 o'clock on election day. And then you designate someone of your choice to deliver your signed application to the election office. They get the ballot, bring it to you, and then they return it by the close of the polls on election day. So it's just important to know that there is that opportunity as well, should something of an emergency nature happen.
Thank you.
Well, that is the conclusion of our panel today. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to give a special thanks to all of our panelists. I feel like I've learned so much. I hope you have as well. And I just want to encourage you to join us downstairs in the Great Hall of Flags for the main celebration starting at 12:30. Thank you.